Hey guys, welcome back to Medical Coding with Blue. Today's episode is Letters to Blue. If you are brand new to my channel, welcome. I am Blue. I'm a medical coder. I have been a medical coder for over 10 years. On these episodes that I call Letters to Blue, I take letters that I've gotten by emails and some comments that I get from some of the videos, and I put it all into one episode and I talk about my opinions and what advice do I have to give. So let's go ahead and get started. If you would like to have your letter on the next episode of Letters to Blue, just comment below or shoot me an email. I will include my email address down in the description box below. And thank you to everybody who submitted their letter or their question. All right, so let's get started. Okay, the first one is, hi ma'am, nobody is ready to give a chance for fresh medical coder. Then how we will get experience? At least internship, don't want salary for the first 4 to 6 months. Just wanted to learn how a medical coder is working in a hospital or clinic. So here's the thing. They hire new coders all the time. Now, getting a job as a brand new medical coder is a lot, okay? But there is entry-level positions out there. You just have to know where to look for them. And a lot of times when you are looking up these jobs, most people are putting in medical coder. Some are putting in remote medical coder. If you're looking for an entry-level job that is a remote medical coder, you're not going to find it, because typically, if you're working remotely, you have had to have had experience. Now, right now, because we're in the pandemic, if you are applying at a place that you have to physically go and they send you home, then that's something different, because that's everybody right now. And I have viewers who are brand new credentials, and they're already gotten their first jobs and they're working at home right now. But it's just temporary until everything settles down, and then they're going to be expected to be back at the facility. Now, you can stand out as a brand new medical coder. You have to have a really good resume. You have to have a really good cover letter. You have to do a very strong interview. With this comment, and I'm reading these comments as they are typed. I'm not trying to fix them or anything like that. But I will say this. If your English is not good, you need to work on your English. If your sentence structure is not good, you need to work on that as well. Because I can just imagine the resume itself and the cover letter if the comment is like this. So you have to have a really good cover letter. You have to have a really good resume. You have to do these things in order to stand out so that they will give you a chance. Is it a challenge? Of course it is. I talked about that many times, but it's not impossible. So you just really have to apply yourself, watch the videos that I've talked about, these tips for brand new medical coders, and you'll see that when you start changing your approach, you may see some results. Okay, so that is my opinion on that one. The next letter. Hi, I'm from India. I have a CPC certification with 3 years of experience in medical coding. I have one doubt. What are the process to get a job UK and USA? I've tried a lot from India for attending interview. I got shortlisted under NHS, but they don't have any telephonic interviews. Because of that, I lost the interview position. So will you please guide me to getting a job in abroad for Indian residency? Myself and my friends tried a lot, so if anyone knows who the process, which means, is there any possibility to attend the interview through Skype or any telephonic way? And if not, what would be the further process to get a job in abroad, so it will be easier for others also? Here's the thing, I don't live abroad. So I don't know. And a lot of times when I am looking for jobs, they are here, right? They're here based in the US. I am in the US. So if you're looking for a job and you're in India or another foreign country, you have to look there, or you have to find out what their regulations are or how they go about getting jobs over there. I mean, I would assume that it's the same way as just applying and looking and applying and just doing that. So I can't help you. I'm sorry. I don't know about how that works when they're overseas like that. So next letter. Hey, I have a question / advice. I'm a brand new medical coding student who graduated in May, earning a degree in art. Due to the pandemic, I brought a medical coding course since jobs were limited and I had a friend/mentor encouraging me. Biology, chemistry, and I are friends, but I'm having trouble getting through all the material. There is less than a month left. However, I feel lost. I feel as if I cannot remember, and I keep doubting myself. Or when I do find a job, does it get easier to retain all the material? And how do you cope with the mental fatigue of cramming in all the information? So what happens when you're in school, of course, you go through information overload, right? You've got all this stuff that you're learning, but remember, this is the foundation. You're learning all of this stuff foundation-wise, right? And you're learning the rules, you're learning how to code, and this is something that is brand new. This isn't taught to us in school, maybe biology, but not like the coding part. So this is just going to take some time. The thing that you have to understand is it's not something that you're going to learn overnight, and you're not going to be able to retain this information overnight. The thing you have to learn how to do is say, okay, I'm going to take a step back. And the fact that I know I don't have to memorize all of this stuff, but I do have to know how to find it, is going to take some of that mental burden off so that you're not feeling that pressure to remember everything. When you are studying for your exam, work on your speed, know the basic fundamentals, know the fundamental basics. That is where you got to start at, because like I said before in other videos, when you're a kid and you're in school, they start you off in kindergarten, you're learning your letters and your numbers, and then you build from there. And as you go up in grades, you start learning more about reading and math. So that is something to think about and sort of equate it to this. When you are in medical coding school or your certification program, it's kindergarten. You're learning your building blocks. And then when you get into the real world, that is when you start advancing. It will get easier with time. You just really have to be patient with yourself. And that is the hardest thing, I think, for brand new medical coders, because they see all of this information and then they get really overwhelmed. With somebody that has a strong background with biology and chemistry, you're going to do fine because chemistry is not a joke. Biology is a little bit different, but chemistry is not a joke. So if you can do really good in that, you can do really good in this, because just the amount of studying alone, right? And with chemistry, you have to get it. Either you get it or you don't get it. If you get it, then you're good. It's the same thing with coding. Eventually, you'll be able to get it. You have to expose your brain to different methods of learning, obviously, because that's really going to help you. Also, look into learning more. How can you learn more? Get practice workbooks. They do have practice workbooks, and I do leave a link for the 2019 version down in the description box below. It's a workbook. It has odd-numbered answers, and I recommend that for students because it's going to give you like the opportunity to do practice outside of what you are working with, and it will give you more more opportunities to get more confident with your coding. Okay, I also have my Patreon channel. On my Patreon channel, I do exercises in both outpatient and inpatient. Recently, I started on that. I also do other exercises as well. So HIPAA, I bring that up. OIG, I bring that up. And I do crossword puzzles because that helps with the medical terminology. So finding other ways of learning things also will stimulate your brain and help you to retain more things. I'm just saying. So if you're interested in that, I will leave my link for my Patreon channel down in the description box below. I do offer one-on-one tutoring, so if you're interested in that, just email me for my rates and we'll go from there. But learning is a very patient process. You have to be patient with yourself. You can't get overwhelmed, because when people get overwhelmed, they tend to sort of walk away from it. And this is going to be a long haul. So just get used to it, because it is a marathon. It is not a sprint. All right. So that's my advice on that one. All right. Next one. Hi, Blue. Is medical billing and coding similar or close to MDS? And I asked the viewer, what do you mean by MDS? Only because I never want to assume what abbreviations mean with certain people. Okay. With anybody. All right. So they replied, it stands for the minimum data set, and it is mainly done in nursing homes. They do comprehensive assessments of residents' functional capacities. I always hear MDS nurses tell me that they have to do such codes when they do assessments. Also, they normally encode the diagnosis with ICD-10 upon admission. So here's the thing. When it comes to like how nurses, sometimes they say that they do coding, their version of coding and what we do as medical coders is completely different. With nurses who are inputting in codes, that is literally just code selection. That is not the process of what we do, which is review the documentation. We have to comprehend what we're reading, and we have to make sure that the diagnoses and the procedures match up to what happened in that visit, or in that encounter, or in that stay. So that is the difference there, because selecting a code is not the same as reading the documentation, having those where you're having to comprehend everything and add up and make sure that everything is where it needs to be, like as far as like having evidence for your diagnosis selection. You need to make sure that you do all of those things, and that is coding. All right, we got to make sure that everything is captured, and being able to see those things versus somebody that just selects codes is two completely different things. So a lot of times when I hear from nurses, sometimes, and I know this person is not a nurse, but I'm just saying that a lot of times nurses will get confused, like, oh, I already do coding, I know how to code. No, you select codes. That's completely different from like reading and comprehending and actually coming up with different codes, or verifying that the codes that are already selected are the correct codes. Because whenever I see a provider that already selects their codes, I'm going to automatically assume that those codes are wrong, because doctors, nurses, nurse practitioners, I meant to say, PAs, they're not meant to be coders. Okay, that's our job. That's why we get paid. So I'm going to assume that their code selections is wrong. I am pleasantly surprised when they are correct. But sometimes they forget things, or they don't remember, or the sequence is not correct. And that's one of those things. So that's why I always say that even if you see the codes already selected, don't get overjoyed and say, oh, this is already done, I can just hit enter and be done with it. No, you need to make sure that these codes that are selected are reflecting what happened in this visit. So that is my advice on that one. But no. Code selection and actual medical coding is two different things. All right, and the last letter. I recently passed my CPC exam. Congratulations. And while looking for a job, I am working through Practicode program to remove the A status. And Practicode, if you don't know, is an AAPC product. Okay. It has been helpful to have to code without just choosing from multiple choices where I know the right answer is in there somewhere. I am trying to learn from the rationales that are given when I make a mistake. It has led me to wonder, how exactly are mistakes found in the real world? I've heard you talk about audits, but that find mistakes, and then mistakes are reviewed with the coder, but I'm just curious how those mistakes are found in the first place. Is it because the encoder catches them, the insurance company, the auditors themselves? Are there ever instances where the coder gets something wrong and is never caught? I want to strive for excellence in my future coding job, and I'm not seeking for a way to get away with mistakes that hurt people or the patient, hurt the provider or the patient. But I am just trying to understand a bit more of the process. I hope this makes more sense, and I look forward to your input. So to answer your question, how are these mistakes caught in the first place? The encoder, the insurance company, or the auditors themselves? All three. With the encoder, the great thing about the encoder, and I use 3M encoder at my facility. The great thing about this is when we are looking at our work queue, right? Which all of our encounters flow into what's called a work queue, okay? There's several different work queues that you can work from. It depends on what you're looking at. But the thing about these is it has the way of screening out, okay, these are all no credit. There's been no credit selected. So we know that this list needs to be reviewed and looked at. And when you're looking at it, it'll tell you that there's an edit. It'll tell you that there's something going on, or it'll say complete status. So if you see those edits, then you know I need to look at this one because it's saying that there's something wrong with the code selection. So that's your first tip off that there's something wrong. The second thing is with the insurance company. If the insurance company, the claim gets submitted to the insurance company says that there's nothing here to support this, or this is not, something's not right with this, they can kick it back. They don't necessarily have to tell you what specifically is wrong, and you'll hear that a lot of times, is that insurance companies will not tell you what specifically is the problem. So you have to make sure that you really review, and that's when having a medical coder on staff that is well trained will really be helpful, because medical billers are not required to be certified, and they're not required to know all of the things that we know, because the task of the biller is to process the paperwork. So if you have a person who does medical billing and the coding, and they're well versed in both, then you have a very powerful piece of manpower. But you have to make sure that that person is detail trained on everything in order to catch these things, so that there's not a lot of denials, because the code selections and the documentation, you know, they need to make sure that they match up, and if they don't, then they need to kick it back. So auditors are also another good one, because auditors are randomly picking from completed lists of work, and every coder, your digital signature is on everything that you touch. Every single encounter you touch, every single time you open up the encoder and to enter in anything, it's showing the timestamp. How long were you in there? What was the minutes, and when did you enter this? What did you delete? What did you add? It's giving all this information. So you're leaving a paper trail every single time you are in the electronic medical record or in the encoder. You're leaving a trail. So with this in mind, an auditor is going to be able to run a whole report and say, I need to see how many encounters Bleu coded for this day. So all the encounters that I touched will populate onto a report. And the auditor, or in this case, it would be my supervisor, she looks through this list and she randomly picks 10. Okay, I'm just spitballing here, okay? She randomly picks 10. She goes through and she's looking to see, because codes can still slip through and still show as completed, right? But if she's looking at it and reviewing it, and maybe I missed a diagnosis, or maybe I selected an injury when it should be a sequela. That doesn't happen. I'm really good with sequelas. I'm just saying. But there's been times when I've missed a diagnosis. I didn't even see it. Like, it's literally right in front of my face, and I just missed it. And also, really, you know, and so I'll have to go back and correct. But there's times when things like that happen and you just missed some things. That's why there's a little bit of a sliding scale when it comes to what the accuracy is. And that's why accuracy varies from facility to facility. It also depends on how many records are being pulled. Because if you only have a very small number of records being pulled, if you make a couple of errors, those couple of errors is really going to pinch. If you have a facility that gives out the average or a really good amount of records pulled to review, just to make sure everything's good, it's not going to hurt so bad. But you have to look at those types of things. So it can be caught by an auditor, and it can be caught by the insurance company, and it can also be caught by the encoder. So there's lots of different safety nets. And when it comes to, is there instances where the coder gets something wrong and it is never caught? The caliber of every single medical coder is different. I wouldn't be able to vouch for every single medical coder, but I can say that there's people who have looked at me and said, "Oh, I didn't know that it was that was coded that way." And then if I showed them like a coding clinic, or if I show them how it is in the book, then they're like, "Oh, oops, you know, like I didn't know that." And if it's not caught by the auditor, if the auditor audits it doesn't see the error, but then it's brought to their attention later, then it's like, oh, wait a second. Maybe that we were supposed to be doing it that way. So like I said, you always want to strive to be a high caliber medical coder. Things like this do happen, all right? But that's why I always stress that you have to be constantly studying and making sure that you're ahead of the curve when it comes to all of these updates and changes. Reading the coding clinics is a good start to that. There is a link, and I'm going to have to leave it in the description box. I think it's on one of the other videos I did. But it is a link to the coding clinic, and you can subscribe to the coding clinic. And it's got all of the questions that are submitted, and then you can look at it, and it's giving advice, literally, from the people that create these books, all right? Not the books themselves, not the publishers, but the people who are actually responsible for answering these questions. So you can look at those coding clinics. They're very useful. That is a good step towards making yourself very high caliber, is being able to cite those sources. And the fact that you are citing a coding clinic is really huge, because that is like the holy grail of answers, you know? So, I mean, it's one of those things. I've seen people who make mistakes all the time because they didn't know. And if they're not educated, these are just things that happen. And you just have to learn, and you have to move on, and you have to make sure that you correct those mistakes and keep moving forward. That's all you can do, so that the mistakes are to a minimum. All right. But we're all human, and we're all in the process of learning things. So you're only as strong as the strongest coder on your team. So if everybody is sort of having that same attitude, like, hey, we want to learn this stuff, we want to get in here, we want to get educated so that we can be better, and we can code better, and we can code sharper, then that's great. But if you have a group of people that is, well, I'm just here to collect a check and go home, you have to make sure that you keep yourself educated and keep going, because at the end of the day, it's not about your other coworkers. It is about your providers. It's about those patients, because we in our own ways are advocating for these patients by making sure that the records are being coded appropriately and accurately. And that's the thing. So, and I've talked about it before, where like people who don't speak English, and English is not their first language, they've confused cardiac lead and lead poisoning, because LEAD is spelled the same way, right? But one is lead and one is lead. So there is a huge difference between the two. But this is what happens sometimes, and these things get confused. But there's safety nets in place when these things are submitted, and you see like these errors. And that's why sometimes when these errors come back, it's like, oh, okay, well, we know this or we know that. It is all about the details and paying attention and making sure that you are submitting everything as appropriately as you possibly can, learning from your mistakes, and working with your auditor. If your auditor is really good, and if you have a really good auditor, that's great, because that is what you need. Everybody needs a really good auditor. Me personally, I've had good auditors and I've had really bad ones. And the really bad ones, I say, it's because sometimes auditors will say, it's because I say so that you will do it this way. If it is not supported and they are not giving you the appropriate references to support their argument, and you have appropriate references to support your argument, then it really does need to go to a third-party neutral, because it can't just be just because the auditor says it's this way. And you can't be afraid, because according to the standards of ethical coding, you have to speak up if there's something inappropriate with the coding. I'm just saying. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up. Wasn't that fun? All right. Because my video is about to go out on me. So anyway, I'm on LinkedIn. So if you are on LinkedIn, I invite you to come in and join me there as well. If you are looking for a tutor, I am a tutor. So let me know, and I will leave all of my email and all of my socials down in the description box below. So if you are a medical coder, a medical coding student, Somebody curious about the fascinating world of medical coding, a provider or a nurse, I invite you to like and subscribe and follow me on my journey in medical coding. I will see y'all next time. Bye!